All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. This is Ryan Shumpert. I'm Rick Butler here in Neyland Stadium. A little bit of a different view than we normally have. We actually have the north end zone behind us here, as you can see over my shoulder. We are here after another Tennessee win. They cap off their 4-game, 5-week home stretch with an undefeated streak, taking down Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, and Mississippi State, 4 SEC opponents right here in Knoxville. Here to break it all down with me, as always, Ryan Shumpert. I do want to get into the game. I know the people want to get into the game. They want to talk about Nico. But real quick, I just want to talk about your day. If you want to skip over a couple minutes, feel free. But you got to listen to the day that Ryan has had. Take it from the top for me.
That's a great start. Really a professional podcaster here.
Just like the last podcast.
Woke up at 6:10, got to G3 parking garage at about 6:50, where I met friend of the program, Go Vols 247 Ben McKees. He was nice enough to do the driving today to Louisville. We got to Louisville, covered Tennessee basketball game against the Cardinals, a 77-55 win. Did a little bit of work there, got back in the car, did some work on, I'm not sure what the highway that connects Louisville to Lexington, but then 75 South, and rolled into the press box at, I don't know, you were there at that point, what, 5 to 10 minutes sometime before kickoff?
Yeah, I think you definitely made kickoff, right?
Definitely made kickoff, yeah.
The thing that we talked about before the game was whether Ryan was going to get to the game before a point was scored or not. And that was a bit of a fun kind of figure it out, because not only were you trying to time whether, you guys were actually going to make it in the press box, but then you had to factor in, is one of these offenses going to put up points quickly on the board? So that was kind of a fun one.
Which is no given for Tennessee this
season.
No,
but it was a moot point as you got in before kickoff. So it's been a huge day as we sit here and record this here from Neyland Stadium. It is just about 12:40 in the morning. So we're going to try to get through this thing. As always, in case you missed our instant reaction down there on the field right after the game, go ahead and check that out right here on the Rocky Top Insider YouTube account, or actually, it's just there. This is a podcast, so just the video is over on YouTube. All right, Ryan, let's break this thing down, and we obviously have a big lead story. But first, before we get there, number 7 Tennessee defeats Mississippi State by a score of 33-14. I do not have the exact quarters in front of me, but Tennessee took a
27 at halftime.
Yes, a 20-7 lead into the halftime break. So then Tennessee outscores Mississippi State by a score of 13-7 in the second half of play.
Good work.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that in case anybody listened to our last podcast. I really tried to step up my mathematics. Ryan, before we get into anything with the game, though, I think obviously the people want to they want to know about the quarterback.
Yeah.
That was a huge story coming out of the game, and really it was a huge story during the game. Dylan Sampson, we know, got banged up right there at the end of the second quarter. He heads into the locker room early before halftime. That's sort of the only injury note that you were thinking about. Yes, yeah. Nico had taken that big hit, I believe, on the series before, or maybe it was that same series.
The same drive that Sampson had gotten hurt, but the second to last series of, Tennessee got a kicked field goal, forced a 3-and-out, got the ball back with like 20-ish seconds, ran 2 plays, kicked another field goal. And he was out there. I think it was a 21-yard pass to Squirrel White to set up the field goal.
So then Tennessee comes out of halftime. Offense is headed onto the field first. I think in the press box there was a ton of commotion. Out there in the stands, it was complete silence because everybody was so shocked. Gaston Moore takes over at quarterback for Nico Iamaleava. And here's what Josh Heupel had to say after the game. Quote, "We anticipate having him ready for next week." That game is going to be against Georgia. Resuming quotes. "Precautionary measure at halftime. Feel like we'll be ready to roll Saturday." So that's what Josh Heupel said about Nico Iamaleava. But that was a major storyline of the game. Not only is it a surprise that Tennessee did not have Nico in at quarterback for the second half, but they had to kind of figure out how to continue to put points up on the board so that they could get this win behind Gaston Moore, who is a longtime veteran of the Josh Heupel offense.
Yeah, for sure. We finally saw him in a big moment, or at least meaningful action, and some good, some bad. Maybe not a ton of bad, but the offense just, certainly was lacking a gear. So Tennessee found a way to do enough. Certainly facing the worst run defense in the SEC helped in that. And their one touchdown drive was largely on the ground, a couple pass interference calls, but they ran the ball well in that drive. Dylan Sampson, I think it was a 32, maybe 33-yard touchdown run. So they did enough to get by with Gaston Moore. But obviously, they're going to need Nico Iamaleava to win some of these games down the stretch.
Yeah, it was Gunslinger Gaston Right. At least that's kind of how we were talking about it up
Yeah.
in the press box. Just a guy who's got no fear to throw the ball anywhere on the field. Sometimes it might kind of trend to a little bit reckless, but other times I actually felt like it kind of gave Tennessee a couple of jolts throughout the game. And not always was a completion. There was at one point where I think it was back-to-back plays. Tennessee moved 30-plus yards down the field just based on 2 pass interferences when they were throwing it deep.
Back-to-back plays, I want to say.
I think you're actually right. And maybe there was even another penalty tacked on top of all that, but I certainly remember the pass interference. So it was a bit of a wild ride for those first couple of drives where Moore came out as Tennessee's quarterback. But, of course, Tennessee is a team that relies on the run game. Dylan Sampson was able to return to the game, I believe, on the second drive in the second half. And, man, we'll talk about Dylan Sampson in a minute here. But that's how Tennessee got it done in the second half with the backup quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. And then, obviously, there's just like a heaviness is a dramatic term, but there's just like a cloud, would probably be a better way, over the game. Tennessee wins. All right, what's the deal with Nico? And a positive update from Josh Heupel. You want to read a statement? You have the statement typed out. You want to read it?
I think I just read it.
Oh, my gosh. I blanked on it.
Yeah, I think I just did. Don't quote me on that.
I believe it. But all that to say, I don't know. Color, not skeptical.
Okay.
But hesitance. Look, here's let me go negative. Josh Heupel has been deceptive, maybe not quite, maybe too dramatic of a term, but Josh Heupel has maybe not been the most forthcoming about injuries, and he's been played coy. Lid was on about injuries in the past, so that makes me feel maybe a little bit hesitant, maybe trying to make sure Georgia has to prepare for him.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, what I do think is a good sign is that Josh Heupel came in the press conference, before it started, he was kind of laughing. He was kind of he knew what everybody wanted to ask about. He was kind of joking about it. So maybe Josh Heupel's just a good actor. But to me, it feels like if he was just lying about it, he maybe wouldn't have been in quite as good of a mood.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe Josh Heupel's just a good actor. But and certainly this was a game they could be precautionary with him. So that aspect of it, I think is a positive, but still a little bit of hesitance for me. When it comes to Josh Heupel just essentially saying Nico's going to be ready for next week.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the things that we monitor. And you just hit the nail on the head, so I won't need to repeat any of that about Josh Heupel's sort of, like you mentioned, his forthcomingness, if you will, if that's a word, about the injury. But we also know that there's going to be a couple moments this week that we might get a little bit more clarification on that. So stay tuned to Rocky Top Insider, not only for Josh Heupel's opening press conference on Monday as he opens up Georgia week, but then also the injury report that comes out Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday before the game. Those should give us a better indication. But you're right. I mean, if there's ever a time to kind of play coy about it a little bit, it's probably before the biggest game of your season coming up against Georgia in Athens, especially when that game's going to be at night, especially when Georgia's now coming into that game with a different mindset after a loss to Ole Miss. So I do think that there are a couple options on the table. Certainly, this is college football. It's a wild world. But like you had mentioned, I think there was enough optimism from the press conference today to make me say, okay, I think that things are going to be on the right track. There was a lot of the second half where I was thinking to myself, man, you and I got to go back and we got to start breaking down some Gaston Moore film, right? We got to figure out how Gaston Moore is going to attack this.
The high school tape.
See how many pass interferences they can draw against the Georgia secondary next week. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case, but we will we'll hopefully get a little bit more clues as we continue on this week.
Yeah, two more things on that. One to me interesting is, again, Nico didn't even go to the sideline in the second half. So for it to just be purely precautionary, that seems strange to me that he didn't even come to the sideline if he didn't just know he's going to play next week.
Yeah.
And then two, train of thought, trying to remember it. It was something Gaston Moore related. Oh, at the very least, it doesn't feel like Nico's going to be out for the remainder of the season. And even with Nico,
you're saying if something comes up where he can't play next week.
Yeah, even if he doesn't play next week, it doesn't feel like it is a season. Because if it's a season-ending thing, you get. Look, we have, and we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot more about this on the podcast later in the week. Absolute logjam in the SEC with all these 10-2 teams now.
Yeah, no kidding.
And essentially, barring some surprises, a 10-2 SEC team or a couple of them are going to get left out. we saw it last year, Florida State and Travis Hunter. If Nico's hurt, they're not going to put Tennessee in the playoff.
No, not a chance.
And on top of that, it's going to be really hard to win the Vanderbilt game if Nico's hurt. So at the very least, it feels like even if he misses next week, Nico is going to be back at some point. Is that enough for Tennessee to get in the playoffs? We'll see, but it certainly isn't going to hurt them in that debate like it could have if he was out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we get back on the show with Jack Foster here next week, there's a lot of playoff conversation to be talked about, especially after this week. A lot of two-loss teams. There are a couple of teams who might be projecting that second loss or potentially even be projecting a third loss. Alabama smoked LSU in Baton Rouge. The Live Tiger didn't do much for that scoreboard. I'm sure LSU would trade that Live Tiger for a couple more points on the scoreboard, but they didn't get it tonight. So there's plenty to break down from the playoff aspect of things coming up next week when we have Jack Foster back on the show. Again, we'll read you this quote one more time. You can go and find it on.
I like it.
You can go and find
Maybe I'll listen to it this time.
You can go and find it on RockyTopInsider.com or RockyTopInsider on social media. Quote, "We anticipate having him ready for next week. Precautionary measure at halftime. Feel like we'll be ready to roll Saturday." So that is what Josh Heupels had to say about his quarterback after the game, after the win against Mississippi State. When you have a backup quarterback in, when you have a little bit of adversity that you have to overcome in the middle of the game that you might not have expected to get there, you rely on what you know how to do. And for Tennessee, that was Dylan Sampson. Now, at the same time, Dylan Sampson was also seemed to be a little bit banged up right during that time. But as we mentioned, he returned to the game pretty early in the second half. And as he's been this year, Dylan Sampson was the engine of this Tennessee offense. He was huge for Tennessee in this game, just continuing to push the ball down the field, continuing to give them a solid option to gain yards. And, of course, he broke out some like he normally does. Dylan Sampson finishes the day with 149 yards and a touchdown on 30 carries. Deshaun Bishop was not available for this game as the backup, so it turned to Peyton Lewis. And then even Cam Seldon got a couple of runs as Dylan Sampson was making his way back to the game as well. So plenty of good experience for those young running backs. I think that's important as you move into the final stretch of the season here, especially with guys getting wear and tear on their bodies, as you can see what happened tonight. But, man, Dylan Sampson is phenomenal for this offense.
Yeah, I mean –
There's not many creative ways to say it.
You're
We've
right.
said it all season.
We've talked about it a lot. There's only so many ways to say it. Yeah, I think he's going to be sore tomorrow. I mean, 30 carries tonight, banged up, and he was just really good again. And
I think he was supposed to talk to the media, but they were saying he was already going through treatment, just already going through that post-game. I don't know if it's ice bath or whatever they're doing with Division I athletes, but I would imagine he's going to be sore too.
For sure, and he carried the workload for Tennessee tonight, and again on a night they really needed him to. And you probably felt like going into this game, this would be a game that they weren't going to need to use him a ton. Now I will say, or maybe use him as much, more than a ton would probably be the better phrasing. I did think Tennessee played it smart. Their last two drives of the game when they kind of had the game under hand, 3-score game. He wasn't in the game. They didn't rush him. On that note. You mentioned that Deshaun Bishop out. He's been Tennessee's number 2 running back. Peyton Lewis, 14 carries. Cam Seldon, 6 carries. Feels very clear that Peyton Lewis is ahead of Cam Seldon in the pecking order right now, which is, so interesting. I mean, we spent so much time this offseason talking about Cam Seldon backup running back. Will he be available for the start of the season? He's fallen down that depth chart. Peyton Lewis returned kicks tonight, which is something
which was surprising to see because I don't know if Sampson had made his way back into the game at that point.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think he did.
Maybe the drive before.
But either way, it was like, wow, you're using one of your two, healthy quotes, running backs for the kick return. Woof.
Yeah, so that's, been the back. Everything behind Sampson's been interesting with the running backs all year, and more of that tonight. It just feels like they're super banged up on offense right now. Andrej Karic went down in this game, I believe, in the first half and didn't return. I think that was the second quarter.
Yeah, Lampley came in.
And then Dante Thornton went down in the third quarter after he caught a pass and didn't come back in, went to the injury tent. So we'll see what all that stuff is, what those guys' statuses are available for next week. And obviously the quarterback is going to carry so much more weight than any other injury on the field, but just an offense that already had, has been mostly healthy this year, was a little bit banged up with Bishop coming into this one, felt like they got really, really banged up tonight.
It also felt like what was important for this game for the Tennessee offense were chunk plays. And this was something that we talked about down on the field for the instant reaction. This is something that you and I were talking about through the game. But whether it was through the run, through the pass, Again, we're talking about a game where Tennessee played half of it with a backup quarterback in. You need some of those moments to kind of spur your offense along, to kind of get a jump start if things aren't always operating smoothly. And Tennessee got that. Starting with the first drive of the game, Tennessee actually punches in a touchdown, I believe, for the first time since Kent State. We'll figure that out as we go.
Accurate. Yeah.
Scored a touchdown on the first drive of the game. And it was a big chunk play to score away.
It was.
Who got behind the defense.
It was very similar to the play Tennessee missed against Alabama in the first half, right at the same spot in the field. 4th and 6 play right in the middle. Good throws wide open, but good throw. Nico missed him wide open against Alabama, so it was a good throw. And then they hit their second touchdown tonight, the deep one to Dante Thornton, who had a lot of separation, a little bit underthrown, but DB didn't do a good job of finding the ball. Thornton makes a nice catch, makes the DB miss, and then goes in for a touchdown. So the chunk plays that have often been missing for this Tennessee offense this season, they were there tonight for the Vols.
Yeah, they were. And again, we're talking about a situation, and who knows what will happen next weekend. But again, those are the kind of plays that it's not always going to look pretty for 4 quarters. It's certainly not always going to look perfect for 4 quarters. But if you can figure out ways to get those plays, because we've talked about the struggles of Tennessee's wide receiver group throughout this season, but they're still plenty capable of making some of those big plays, especially when you use your guys to their advantage. Like I thought, again, getting Squirrel White behind the defense right there, just using his speed to get past him into the end zone. That's taking advantage of what your receiver can do. So those chunk plays are going to they were extremely important for Tennessee against Mississippi State tonight, and they're going to continue to be important. It was also a very advantageous opportunity for Tennessee to get some of these chunk plays.
Yeah,
but I also look at that as it's good that they happen then, right? It would be a lot worse to be sitting here and saying
100%.
The opportunity was there, but Tennessee still didn't get those. The opportunity was there, and Tennessee took advantage. So that's what you got to do in the sport of college football, and that's kind of what the offense did tonight.
100%. I mean, we talked about it or wrote about it going into the game that there would be, if you didn't do it, there'd be an element of, if not now, when, and it'd be discouraging, a bad sign if you couldn't, and it's not the end-all, be-all that they did it against a bad Mississippi State defense, but at the very least, this group that has been so close at times and they've been so frustrating at times, and I'm sure it's been as frustrating it is for any fans. I'm sure it's been all the more frustrating for the players. They got to see it. They got to see themselves have some success, and they probably would have liked it for it to be Nico for all 4 quarters and had a good chance to score 40-plus points.
Yeah.
But, they still saw some of that in the half he was in there, and they functioned fine. Maybe not great, but they didn't collapse without him in the second half either.
I'll tell you what, just looking at the stats right here, I mean, Nico was kind of on pace for, I believe, his season high in yards. That's not counting Chattanooga. Taking that game off the map. It actually might have even passed that as well. But Nico in the first half with Tennessee up 20-7 going into the break, 8 of 13 for 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was efficient. He was sharp. He looks like he's continuing to get better, as we kind of noted this whole season.
Yeah, a couple runs too, 4 carries for 22 yards.
That was big.
He was solid. Didn't really miss many throws. Made some less jaw dropping ones that he had last week, but he was good. He was on time, accurate with the football. He was playing well before he left the game with the injury.
Anything else from the offense that you want to hit before we move on?
I don't think so. Max Gilbert, I guess, if we want to. That's not the offense.
Yeah,
let's
bring it into special teams. It is exactly where I was going to go with it.
Okay.
Max Gilbert, 12 points of his own here tonight.
Yep.
That helped Tennessee get up to the 33-point mark that they finished the game at. And this was a huge game for Max Gilbert. Again, we've talked about it the last couple of weeks. He has struggled a good bit. And Josh Heupel has kept his confidence in his kicker, but he has struggled. And some of those have been lengthy kicks that Tennessee has been asking Gilbert to make. But you could also tell that maybe it was getting to him a little bit. Maybe he was just kind of piling up a little bit too much. Man, he shook off whatever cobwebs or whatever doubts were there tonight as he comes in and he drills 4 field goals for Tennessee. Scores from 24, 38, 38, and 51. We talked about it down there on the field, and that 51 was big because it sent Tennessee into the halftime break with a little bit more momentum, but also just points on the scoreboard and gave Tennessee a chance to double dip coming out of the second half, which did not happen. But still, you have the opportunity there. Man, big night for Max Gilbert to bounce back. Certainly a concern from the Tennessee fan base for the last couple of weeks. There was a lot of activity on social media about what Tennessee was going to do in this department. I would imagine that people's fears are a little bit more calmed down. Obviously, the kicking game is so volatile, and it's an incredibly difficult job out there on the field. But I think you see a night like this, and you can say, hey, man, that kid's got a good leg to him, right? And yes, there was a slump the last couple of days, but man, 4 for 4 tonight with 2 from 30 plus and 1 from 50 plus, maybe even his first 50-yarder of the season. There you go. So his best field goal of the season right there. But that's a big moment for Tennessee to get him kind of back and juiced up a little bit.
It's always important, but it's particularly important with this Tennessee team just because of
it's hard to finish drives.
They've been so bad at finishing drives that you got to get points. I mean, that's what killed them against Kentucky last week. The offense didn't do a good job of finishing drives, but they still should have made some of these field goals. And you're right, against Alabama, it was a lot of long kicks, but last week it really wasn't for Gilbert. So that was big. You're right, Tennessee didn't get the double dip, but it kind of felt like they almost got a double dip before. I mean, Tennessee hit 2 field goals.
Mississippi State was so quick off the field before Tennessee got that final possession.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee hit 2 field goals in the final 46 seconds of the first half. That's crazy. Good return, segue into the next special teams thing. Real good return by Boo Carter, probably one of his 2 real nice punt returns on the night. Helped set up that second field goal. Tennessee ran 2 plays. One of them, Iamaleava pass to Squirrel White. I think we talked about a little bit earlier. But Boo Carter gets the full run tonight at punt returner for he's been back there some this season, but the first time he was the full guy. And we saw maybe one instance of those plays that he looks a little uncertain or you hold your breath for a second, which I think is kind of the concern with him. But you saw the talent too. He had a couple of really nice punt returns, and overall was a good night for him. And that's just the spot that Tennessee really hasn't been able to iron down this year. And
he also had a pick, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
he was really good on defense.
Big game for the freshman.
Yeah, he had a tackle for loss. He had that interception. He was really good on defense tonight. It feels like he keeps on getting better and better. And to me, it felt like tonight was his best game of the season.
I'm going to try to tie these things together, although now that I'm thinking about it, it's not really going to tie together that well, but I'm still going to.
It's 12:55.
I'm still going to try it. You referred to Gaston Moore as one of those quarterbacks who every time he drops back, you kind of hold your breath, right?
Yeah.
Because you might be in store for a horrendous football play, but you might be in store for a 50-yard pass down the field, right? You don't know what's going to happen, so you kind of hold your breath a little bit. Boo Carter, when he gets one of those punt returns, it's almost the same similar feeling. Not nearly the degree of man, a lot could go wrong here, but just you kind of hold your breath because you know how talented he is with the ball in his hands.
I think this is a good comparison.
But he can also do some of those plays like what he had on the sideline right here where the ball drops early. It's kind of bouncing up. A couple of Mississippi State defenders are closing in on him. And he still decides to grab it. He made a spin move out of bounds, so I think he knew that the sideline was right there. But in case you were following recruiting, you knew that this guy from the Chattanooga area was extremely talented on both sides of the ball. He's not just a great defensive back who's been playing that position for years, but he's had a ton of experience with the ball in his hands, and that's recent experience too. Yep. That's a year ago as he was playing high school ball. So you saw that in his highlight tape a lot. You've kind of wanted to see it a little bit this year if there was ever an opportunity for it, and getting that run at punt returner tonight. You got to see that a little bit with your own 2 eyes. I thought he was going to have a house call on that first one that was over here on the south side of the field. He cuts up the middle. I thought if he maybe went to the Mississippi State sideline, he could have gotten a wall right there if Tennessee's defenders had, again, kind of closed that gap. But that was a special night from the freshman.
For sure. And special talent for sure. And yeah, to your point, like
Special talent, special teams, special plays. Is that still it's not a thing anymore, right?
I mean, I guess it's still kind of a thing. It's probably out of
the same football season, I think.
What's the guy's name?
Sketch,
that's right. He's a Texans fan, I think. At least
right. That was before all the football season. That was way
season.
Before the football season because he's dropped off the map now.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything about him.
All that to say, not about Sketch. All
As the lights go out.
About the punt return game and the adventure that it feels like with Boo Carter. It's kind of been an adventure with Squirrel White. It was kind of an adventure with Sherman McCoy. So it's like if it's going to be an adventure with those guys, and those guys don't make you feel great back there, might as well give the guy that has the higher ceiling a chance.
And again, I really like what Boo can do with the ball in his hands on that punt return spot. So excited to see what maybe he's going to do. That's going to be a big task if he gets that spot against Georgia next week. It's going to be a filthy environment, night game in Athens. He's going to have a lot to work with back there, but man, he could provide an X factor.
One of the big plays early in that game 2 years ago, I can't remember who was returning punts for Tennessee. I guess it was D. Williams. He didn't catch a punt on a long punt, and Georgia down to the 1 yard line. And I can't remember exactly how it all went down, but I remember that being a big sequence and one to hurt Tennessee early in that football game.
Well, I don't know if Boot Carter enjoys letting a punt past him at any point.
No, it didn't seem
so
like it tonight.
no, it certainly didn't. So we'll see how all that shakes out for next week. But at some point, we will have on the Rec Top Insider website a little bit of breakdown of what Josh Heupel said about Boot Carter and those punt returns. As a lot of people are talking about that online. What else are we talking about, though? I guess
A little defense, I think.
The third phase of the game, and that's going over to Tennessee's defense for the 9th straight game, all 9 games this season.
10th straight game.
10th straight game. Tennessee moves to 9-1 on the season.
They moved to 8-1, but they did it in the
8-1, excuse me. Oh, good point. Tennessee holds their opponent under 20 points, and they got it done with just allowing 2 touchdowns from the Mississippi State offense. And in case you weren't following our coverage leading into the game this week, we knew that Mississippi State defense was not going to be great, and they weren't out there tonight. But I think what might be shocking to some people is just the juxtaposition between Mississippi State's defense and offense. They've got a capable offense, and an offense that can move the ball down the field, they can collect yards throughout the game, and they can put points up on the scoreboard. So what was this going to look like for Tennessee tonight? Obviously, a very potent defense versus a capable offense, and Tennessee's defense got the job done. There were a couple of drives where Mississippi State was really able to put things together. Michael Van Buren is a talented, crafty quarterback.
Yeah.
You knew that he was going to make plays at some point, but really Tennessee's defense, and I don't have the drive chart in front of me. I wish I did, but especially in that second half, I felt like Tennessee's defense was able to limit some of those really long drives. They were able to get Mississippi State off the field in plenty of times. And that was big because this is a Jeff Lebby offense. It looks a lot like the Josh Heupel offense. If you can get Mississippi State off the field in 3 plays, 4 plays, 5 plays, 6 plays, whatever it is, you're going to have a lot of time to work with because they're probably only going to have taken about 60 seconds off the clock or so. That was certainly the case in this game. So I was impressed with what Tennessee's defense was able to do as a whole. I know you'll break it down a little bit more into run defense versus pass defense. But again, just to continue that streak going of holding opponents under 20 points, Jeremiah Thielener talked about it after the game. He said, look, obviously our goal is to put up 0 points, right, for the opposing offense. But I think they take a lot of pride in that more realistic stat, right, of holding opposing offenses under 20. So all in all, I was impressed by what the Tennessee defense did tonight. But break it down for me a little bit more. Run defense, pass defense. Give me your thoughts overall.
Well, I'll go off of what you were talking about. Drive chart.
Oh, yes.
3 and out, punt, interception, punt, touchdown, 16 plays, 75 yards, 748, long touchdown drive. 3 and out, fumble, strip sack, that is on the fumble, touchdown, punt, 4 and out, turnover on downs.
If you break that down a little bit more, you just mentioned it, the final 3 drives of their game was punt, turnover on downs.
14 total yards.
But then you break that down even more to just the fourth quarter alone. Mississippi State had a punt and a turnover on downs. That's how you win. Not that Tennessee was close at the end of the game, but that's how Tennessee's going to win games.
And to your point, too, of the Lebby type of offense being similar to Heupel, 5 possessions of under 2 minutes for Mississippi State tonight. So,
including 2 in the first 3 drives of the game.
Yeah, both of those being under a minute. Just you blink
and you miss it.
That's right. How about that?
It's like we've done this before.
To your original question, run defense again to me struggled tonight. It wasn't great. 179 yards rushing for Mississippi State, 38 attempts. Numbers were really probably a little bit better than that because Michael Van Buren was sacked 4 times in this game. It was kind of a different rushing attack than Tennessee's seen a lot this year. Obviously, they've seen a lot in practice and kind of to more spread you out vertically, run downhill against you. But a lot of big plays Tennessee gave up in the run game. I think it was 7 runs of over 10 yards tonight. One of them over 40 yards. Touchdown, I think it was 19 yards. And even some short yardage situation when, it felt like Mississippi State was definitely going to run. They just lined it up and ran it right at Tennessee and got it. So for so much of the season, Tennessee's run defense was really good. Last 2 weeks, it really hasn't been. I think that's something that you're at the very least monitoring. I do think they missed Keenan Peely. I don't think Tennessee's linebacker play has been particularly good since he's gone down. So that was the worrisome thing or the bad thing tonight. The good thing is the pass defense was really stout. Van Buren completed 38% of his passes, 92 yards, through the interception.
Yep.
Good coverage, good pass rush. Mentioned the 4 sacks. They were stout, and I say, criticize or talk about the struggles on the run defense. They still just gave up 14 points. So it was against a at the very least, a solid Mississippi State offense. So it was another good night for the defense.
And this is how Tennessee is going to continue to win their games. Yes, Tennessee put up 33 points on the scoreboard tonight, but man, they didn't even technically need to score in the second half to get that done because of how potent the defense was for the ball. So that is what we'll be talking about a lot this week, coming up with Tennessee projecting to face the Georgia offense and Carson Beck and all of his struggles. Yep. So we're going to have a ton to talk about this week. We're going to have a ton to write about this week. But that was pretty much the story of the game here in Knoxville tonight. Anything else that you want to get off your chest? I think my notes are pretty much good.
One stat going with that. Kevin Coleman, if you read our story this week, talking to Sam, I'm forgetting his name. This is really unprofessional. Sam Skays, I think, was his name.
I messed up Furman's name last week, so you're not there yet.
There we go. But Todd Furman didn't do anything, didn't help us out with any stories. So, we don't really owe him anything. Type Clarion Ledger. Great podcasting.
Yeah, well, people get it. Sam Sklar.
He talked about how Kevin Coleman from Mississippi State
Sam Sklar
has sneakily been one of the best receivers in the SEC this year, and he had a pretty good night tonight. Mississippi State pass catchers, besides Kevin Coleman, had 5 catches for, doing some quick math, 24 yards.
And none of them had more than 1 catch.
Yes.
A couple of them had 3 targets, 4 targets, whatever it might be. But you're right. Coleman has 5 targets on the day. Nobody else or 5 catches on the day. Nobody else has more than 1. This Tennessee secondary has, it was one of my big question marks going into the season.
It was all of ours.
They have absolutely stepped up when it has mattered most. So great stat pull right there.
Yeah, I know Ricky Gibson was, and Jermon McCoy's been great all year. Not that he was bad tonight, but to me it was more noticeable what Boo Carter did, what Ricky Gibson did. Jalen McMurray had some nice plays in there. So. It feels like that group continues to get better and better. Helps that it feels like nobody has a good passing offense this year. Carson Beck's another one of those guys we would have talked about before the year as being a star, and he's had an awful season. But look, Mississippi State's been pretty solid passing the football since Van Buren's come in. I think they've averaged like 270 passing yards a game, at least in the last 4 games. I know we didn't do a ton against Texas in this first start. They threw over 92 yards tonight, so I don't want to discount, I was hyping up Mississippi State's offense a bit before the week, so I don't want to discount what Tennessee's pass defense did now in hindsight.
And last thing for me, just Tennessee's pass defense has been opportunistic with the interceptions all year. Next week is going to be an opportunity to do that again. Yeah. Carson Beck is not very safe with the ball. I don't know what he did tonight against Ole Miss, but I know that Georgia lost to Ole Miss. So there's a ton to talk about coming up across the week as Tennessee prepares to take on Georgia in what is easily the biggest game of the season to date. We will be there covering the whole thing. But first, we got a lot more to do. So here's what I'm thinking. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning right now. That means this thing probably won't get published and uploaded until about 2 o'clock in the morning or so. If you're listening to this on Sunday morning, we're going to have a ton of content coming out for you all day on RockyTopInsider.com. We're going to have pro football focus grades. We're going to have breakdowns of the game. We're going to have more player interviews from Saturday night. So make sure to head over to RockyTopInsider.com to get all of your Tennessee news, notes, and coverage of the game today. Also, basketball season is in full swing. We talked about it at the beginning of the podcast. In case you missed anything on a big football Saturday, maybe you were tailgating, maybe you didn't get to watch too much of the game. Tennessee basketball had just a dominant win against Louisville in a game where were they favored? Were they slight underdogs?
They opened as 1-point favorites and they closed as 2.5-point underdogs.
And they ended up winning by 22.
Yeah,
in
nice
a
game.
Wire-to-wire game. I think they ballooned the lead all the way up to 26 or 27 at one point. So make sure to go check out the basketball coverage as well. But for now, we will go ahead and wrap this thing up so we can get this guy some sleep, some well-deserved sleep as well. So, hey, thank you very much for listening to the RTI Press Pass podcast, especially at this point in the season, man. It's November 10th as we record this now that it's Sunday. We've had a lot of great listeners. Just continue to stay with the program throughout the whole year. We love that, and we want to hear from you in the comment section as well. So, with that all being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Number 7, Tennessee defeats Mississippi State by a score of 33-14 right here in Neyland Stadium. The final night game, at least on the regular season slate for Tennessee in their home stadium. We will see what the postseason has in store for Tennessee, whatever that might be. But that's a conversation for a different day. This is Ryan Shumpert. You can follow him at rshump00. I am Rick Butler. You can follow me at Rick_Butler on Twitter. Otherwise, make sure you're checking out at Rocky Top Insider on each and every social media platform. That is where we will be. That is where you can find us. Thank you very much for listening to the show today. We'll see you back for the next one.